Newark, New Jersey, June 2001. A man walks out of FBI headquarters for the last time. He's carrying a box. Inside it, years of files, memos, intelligence reports, warnings, dozens of warnings that no one wanted to hear. His name is John P. O'Neill, and he just resigned from the FBI after 25 years of service. Not because he wanted to, because they pushed him out. The reason? He was too obsessed with a man named Osama bin Laden. He kept warning his superiors about a massive attack on American soil. He kept connecting the dots that nobody else wanted to connect. He kept pulling on threads that powerful people wanted left alone, and so they got rid of him. 3 months later, on the morning of September 11th, 2001, John O'Neill reported to his brand new job, his brand new office, on the 34th floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He died that day. And the story of John O'Neill is the most devastating, most infuriating, and most important story you've never been told about 9/11. Because here's what makes it so haunting. John O'Neill didn't just predict that Al-Qaeda would attack the United States. He knew how they would do it. He knew when it was coming, and he spent the last decade of his life screaming it into a void, while the institutions meant to protect America actively worked against him. This is his story. Washington, D.C., 1995. John O'Neill is 44 years old, and he is, by almost every account, the best counterterrorism agent the FBI has ever produced. He's loud. He's intense. He dresses in sharp suits, wears a pocket square, smokes cigarettes, and drinks Johnny Walker Black. He is nothing like the image of a federal agent. He's more like a detective out of a 1940s noir film, someone who operates on instinct, on obsession, on sheer force of will. And in 1995, his obsession has a name, Osama bin Laden. At this point, bin Laden is barely on the radar. The CIA knows who he is, but most of the American intelligence community thinks of him as a financier, a wealthy Saudi who funds extremists. Sure, but not a strategic threat, not someone who could pull off a major operation on U.S. soil. O'Neill doesn't buy that for a second. He's been tracking Al-Qaeda since the early 1990s. He's interviewed sources, cultivated informants, read every piece of intelligence he could get his hands on, and what he sees terrifies him. Al-Qaeda is not a loose network of fanatics. It is a military organization. It has structure. It has hierarchy. It has long-term planning capability. And it has one singular goal: to strike the United States where it lives. O'Neill starts briefing anyone who will listen. He tells his bosses. He tells government officials. He tells CIA counterparts. The response he gets, over and over again, is the same. You're exaggerating. You're too close to this. You're making connections that aren't there. O'Neill goes back to his desk and keeps working. Nairobi, Kenya, August 7th, 1998. At 10:35 in the morning, a truck bomb detonates outside the U.S. Embassy. 213 people are killed. 12 of them are Americans. 4 minutes later, a second bomb goes off outside the U.S. Embassy in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. 11 more people die. The attacks are perfectly coordinated. They are carried out with military precision. They are the work of Al-Qaeda. John O'Neill is on the first plane to Nairobi. And when he gets there, he doesn't just investigate the attack. He starts issuing warnings about the next one, because that's how O'Neill thinks. He doesn't just look at what happened. He looks at the pattern. He looks at what comes after. And what the embassy bombings tell him is that Al-Qaeda is now in a completely different phase of operations. They've demonstrated capability. They've demonstrated reach. They've demonstrated coordination across multiple continents. The next attack won't be embassies in Africa. The next attack will be on American soil. He goes back to Washington and writes a 47-page threat assessment. In it, he outlines the specific capabilities of Al-Qaeda, the specific vulnerabilities of the United States, and vulnerabilities of the United States, and the specific likelihood of a domestic attack. He submits it to FBI leadership. It gets filed away. Aden, Yemen, October 12th, 2000. The USS Cole, a guided missile destroyer, is docked in the port of Aden for a routine refueling stop. At 11:18 in the morning, a small boat pulls alongside the Cole. It explodes. The blast tears a 40 by 60 foot hole in the side of the ship. 17 American sailors are killed. 37 are injured. It is the deadliest attack on a U.S. naval vessel since 1987, and once again, it is Al-Qaeda. John O'Neill is sent to Yemen to lead the FBI's investigation. What happens next is one of the most shameful episodes in the history of American intelligence. O'Neill's investigation is actively obstructed. The U.S. ambassador to Yemen, Barbara Bodine, refuses to cooperate with him. She blocks his team from carrying weapons. She limits their access to Yemeni officials. She creates bureaucratic roadblocks at every turn. The reason? Diplomatic friction. She's worried that O'Neill's aggressive style will damage U.S.-Yemeni relations. O'Neill can't believe what he's hearing. 17 American sailors are dead. A naval destroyer has been nearly sunk, and the FBI's lead investigator is being blocked by a U.S. ambassador. Because his methods are too aggressive, he fights back, he argues, he escalates, he does everything he can. Ambassador Bodine eventually has him banned from re-entering Yemen. The investigation stalls. The full picture of what Al-Qaeda is planning never comes into focus. O'Neill returns to Washington, and for the first time in his career, he starts to lose faith, not in his own analysis, not in the threat, in the system. Washington, D.C., 2000 to 2001. The attacks on O'Neill come from everywhere now. His management at the FBI has turned against him. His superiors think he's a liability, too confrontational, too willing to go around the chain of command, too focused on a threat they don't want to prioritize. There's also a personal scandal being used against him. In 2000, he briefly loses control of a briefcase containing classified documents at a conference in Tampa. The documents are recovered within hours. Nothing is compromised. But the FBI launches an internal investigation that hangs over O'Neill like a cloud. It never results in charges, but it's used, quietly, effectively, to marginalize him. Meanwhile, inside the intelligence community, a wall is growing. The CIA and the FBI are not sharing information. Turf wars, bureaucratic jealousy, institutional pride, all of it is getting in the way of connecting the dots. The CIA knows that two Al-Qaeda operatives, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar, have entered the United States. They have this information in January of 2000. They do not tell the FBI. Those two men will be among the hijackers on September 11th. O'Neill doesn't know about al-Hazmi and al-Mihdhar. He can't know because the CIA won't share the intelligence. But he knows something is coming. He knows it in his bones. In the spring of 2001, he tells a colleague, journalist Lawrence Wright will later report this exchange, that he is convinced Al-Qaeda is going to strike the United States and that it will be spectacular. His colleague asks him when. O'Neill says, soon, very soon. Summer 2001. Inside the CIA, alarms are going off. The agency's counterterrorism center is receiving intelligence at an unprecedented rate. Intercepts, informant reports, signals intelligence, all of it pointing in the same direction. In June 2001, CIA Director George Tenet tells National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice that the system is blinking red. In July 2001, a CIA briefing slide is titled, Bin Laden Planning High-Profile Attacks. On August 6, 2001, just 36 days before the attacks, President George W. Bush receives his presidential daily brief. The title of that brief is, Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S. It warns that Al-Qaeda may be planning to hijack American aircraft. Bush is at his ranch in Crawford, Texas. After receiving the briefing, he reportedly tells the CIA analyst who delivered it, all right, you've covered your ass now. No emergency meetings are called. No heightened security alerts are issued. No one calls John O'Neill. New York City, August 2001. John O'Neill has taken the job. Head of security at the World Trade Center. It is, in many ways, a defeat. He spent 25 years building a career at the FBI. He was supposed to be the man who stopped Al-Qaeda. Instead, he's been squeezed out, sidelined, and effectively fired through bureaucratic pressure. The job at the WTC pays well. It's prestigious in its way, and it gives him something to do. He moves to New York. He starts learning the buildings. He starts thinking about security protocols. His friends say he seemed almost at peace in those final weeks, but he still can't shake it. He tells his friend Chris Isham, a journalist, something in those final weeks that makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck when you read it now. He says, we're due, and we're due for something big. He's standing in the lobby of the World Trade Center when he says it. He's looking up at the towers. New York City, September 11th, 2001, 8:46 a.m. American Airlines Flight 11 hits the North Tower. John O'Neill is in the building. He evacuates safely on the first impact. He calls his son. He tells him he's okay. He tells him he loves him. Then he goes back in. Because that's who John O'Neill is. He goes back into the building to help coordinate the evacuation, to do his job, to be exactly the man he has always been, the guy who runs toward the fire. At 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 hits the South Tower. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapses. At 10:28 a.m., the North Tower collapses. John O'Neill's body is found in the rubble on September 22, 2001. He was 49 years old. Let that sit for a moment. The man who spent a decade warning the United States government about Al-Qaeda. The man who predicted the attack. The man who was pushed out of the FBI because he was too focused on the threat. Died in the attack he had been warning about. Inside the building where he started his new job 3 weeks earlier. After going back in to save other people, there are moments in history where you look at the facts and you can barely process what you're reading. This is one of those moments. After 9/11, the 9/11 Commission spends nearly 2 years investigating what went wrong. What it finds is a picture of institutional failure so comprehensive, it's almost hard to believe. The CIA and FBI were not sharing intelligence. Warnings were not being acted upon. The bureaucratic walls between agencies, what investigators call the wall, prevented the kind of information sharing that might have allowed someone to connect the dots. John O'Neill's name comes up repeatedly. His former colleagues describe him as the one agent who truly understood the threat, who saw the full picture, who tried, year after year, to make the system respond. Richard Clarke, the National Security Council's counterterrorism coordinator, later says that O'Neill was one of only a handful of people in the entire U.S. government who grasped the scale of what Al-Qaeda was building. Lawrence Wright, who won a Pulitzer Prize for his book The Looming Tower, which tells O'Neill's story in devastating detail, puts it even more directly. He argues that if John O'Neill had been given the resources and cooperation he needed, if the CIA had shared its intelligence about Al-Qaeda operatives inside the United States, if the bureaucratic obstruction had not pushed him out of the FBI, there is a genuine possibility that September 11th could have been prevented. Not a certainty, but a possibility, and that's what makes this story so hard to sit with. Here's what I keep coming back to when I think about John O'Neill. It's not just that he was right, it's that everyone knew he was right, and they got rid of him anyway. His FBI superiors didn't dismiss O'Neill because they genuinely believed the threat was overstated. They dismissed him because he was inconvenient, because he was aggressive, because following his warnings would have required resources, attention, and political will that nobody wanted to spend. Ambassador Bodine didn't obstruct his investigation in Yemen because she had good intelligence, suggesting Al-Qaeda wasn't a threat. She obstructed it because she was prioritizing diplomatic relationships over a terror investigation. The CIA didn't fail to share intelligence about al-Hazmi and al-Mihdar because they were incompetent. They failed to share it because of institutional turf wars, because of bureaucratic culture, because of a system that rewarded information hoarding instead of information sharing. John O'Neill didn't fall through the cracks. He was pushed through them by a system that was more interested in protecting itself than protecting the country. After 9/11, the United States created the Department of Homeland Security. It reformed intelligence sharing protocols. It created the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, specifically to break down the walls between agencies. The 9/11 Commission made 41 specific recommendations. Congress passed the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act in 2004, and John O'Neill became, posthumously, something of a legend. Lawrence Wright's book, a TV documentary, a made-for-television film starring Jeff Daniels. His story is known now, at least among the people who follow this stuff. But here's the uncomfortable truth, the systemic problems that killed John O'Neill, the bureaucratic tribalism, the career incentives that punish truth tellers, the tendency to sideline people who are inconvenient. Those don't go away because you reorganize some government agencies. Those are human problems, and human problems don't get fixed with org charts. The question that haunts me, the question that should haunt all of us, is how many John O'Neills are out there right now? How many analysts, agents, investigators are sitting in offices somewhere, looking at a threat that nobody wants to see, writing memos that nobody wants to read, getting marginalized for being too focused, too aggressive, too right? I want to end with John O'Neill, the person, not the symbol, because there's a risk in telling this story of turning him into a martyr, into a clean narrative about one good man destroyed by a corrupt system. The reality is messier. O'Neill was complicated. He was difficult. He had a famously chaotic personal life, multiple relationships, a tendency to charm everyone in the room and then disappear. His colleagues both admired him and found him exhausting. He was a man of contradictions, the sharpest analytical mind in the room, also capable of spectacular personal disorganization. He was human. But here's what every single person who knew him agrees on. When it came to Al-Qaeda, he was right. Not right in hindsight, right at the time, right when everyone else was dismissing him, right when it cost him his career to keep saying it. That kind of courage, the courage to be right when the system punishes you for it, is rarer than we like to think. John O'Neill had it, and we failed him. He was 49 years old when the North Tower fell. He had been at his new job for 18 days. His body was found on September 22nd. He was buried in Seaford, New Jersey. On his grave, they put his FBI badge, because even at the end, even after everything the Bureau did to him, that's what he was, an FBI agent, the one who saw it coming, the one nobody listened to, the only one who knew.